Greetings, friends. Brett Ballinger, pastor, Prince of Peace, Lutheran Church, Marlton, New Jersey. This is a message for Maundy Thursday, 2020. I'm sitting here in my kitchen at the counter where we eat our meals. Because Maundy Thursday happens around a table and a room with the table. Traditionally, we gather and we hear the sermon first in the Lutheran tradition, and then we go through the service on Maundy Thursday, where there is foot washing, reading of lessons, and then the celebration of Holy Communion. This year, because we are in shelter in place in our own homes, those rituals will not happen in that way. And we grieve that. And we can also look at it as a new opportunity. A new opportunity to look a little more deeply at the original times of these practices, where these practices spring forth. And so we have rituals, and our rituals are intended in the church to bring the gifts of grace of a particular time and moment to the present. So let's look at that particular time and moment from which these rituals come and see what gifts of grace come to us, even now as we're sheltered in place in our own homes because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So let's go back to the source. So our Jewish friends have just begun Passover. And some of the gospel traditions tells us the Last Supper happened on the night of one of the Passover nights as well. And so if we look back to the original texts about Passover, especially Exodus 12, which is one of the readings for this day, and we look at Exodus 12 and we see this. This is how you are to eat the Passover lamb. With your loins girded, sandals on your feet, and a staff in your hand, and you are to eat it in haste. It is the Passover of the Lord. Now there's more there to the text, but here we have the people of Israel who have been slaves for 400 years, now are hunkered down in their homes together. And they've been ordered to prepare lamb and to place blood on the doorposts and the lintel above the door, and to eat the meal in this fashion, prepared to travel, prepared for action, prepared to move forward, preparing to be set free. And so I thought, what are the things from which we wish to be set free today? What are the things from which you yearn to be set free today? Sure, there is the obvious. They have the shelter in place lifted, the pandemic passed, people being able to get back to normal. But we don't know when that will be and for how long that will be. Nor did the Israelites. Did they know they had been in slavery for a long time, and in captivity, and hunkered down, and lack of freedom for a long time? And now would this be the new beginning, a new opportunity? And they're not certain, but they are faithful, and they follow the command. And so I invite you to look just even a little deeper beyond just the obvious. But what are the things of which we need to be set free? What are the things that got us into this pandemic in the first place, and our ill preparation for it? How are we prepared in the future? How are we creating a culture and society where we care for one another? As we look at what's happening with the lack of income and businesses, is our society and its present way of living and the way we do our economy, is it really sustainable? Is it really a way that brings life? or does it leave us trapped? And many in debt prison, not prison per se, but in your own, prison of debt, which is really just another way to control people, right? If you look deeply at what's happening, right? And so is this a time then for us to do those things? They're told to eat a meal before the Exodus. What are the things that we need to do to prepare sustenance for ourselves? To the important things that we need to do to be ready for whatever the new normal is, because the old normal wasn't working and it won't be there. People will try to return for sure, some, but this is an opportunity for a new way. And so what are the things that we need to do while we are waiting to be set free? To pray, to be quiet, to do those things that are most important with our friends and family, and though we can't do it in person, how else do we connect to them and are sewn into our lives together with one another? Can we rest? So many of us have been so exhausted and tired, running around all the time. Do we use this time for rest, or whatever moments we have for rest? Do we use this time to figure out how we can support those, especially on the front lines, even more fully? You know, one way already I shared with some members, some people who are nurses and are quite concerned that they don't have the proper equipment, having to reuse face masks for much, much, much longer than they're supposed to. And so I mentioned this to a parishioner, and the person said, oh, well, I have a bunch of N95 masks. And then the person is going to give them to one of our nurses. I wonder how many of you have supplies that you really don't need that can be given to those who are in most need. Please connect with me if you're able to meet that need. So this time, while we're in shelter in place, are we able to look more deeply at what our real needs are and what it is that we need to prepare for to be the people who we really want to be when we are set free? And then the next piece, and please note that we might be nervous, right? And what is the new normal? We don't know what it is yet. We don't know. And it's going to be a bumpy ride for sure. And the Israelites were in the same place. They didn't know. I'm sure they had their own sense of anxiety. What's happening? What's going to happen? Are we actually going to be able to leave? And then indeed, they were out in the desert for a very long time, in the desert, right? Learning what it meant to be people of God. I call the desert time the wilderness school, the time when it was to learn what it means to be God's people. And so then we have the other ritual that is typical for Maundy Thursday, and that is the ritual of Jesus washing his disciples' feet. He begins by washing their feet as they come into the room where they're going to celebrate the Passover meal together. And he's going to give them a new commandment at the end of the meal. And we say Maundy Thursday, it's an Old English word, Maundy, for mandate, Latin mandatum, which means command, a new command. Because at the end of the meal, Jesus gives his disciples a new command to love one another as I have loved you. It is an incredible commandment that's so incredibly difficult to figure out how to live into. How do I do that? How am I able to love others as Jesus has loved me? In fact, it's so impactful that we've been for this whole Lenten season, each week looking at how do we cultivate that love? How do we cultivate and allow the love of God to be set free more fully in us? And we've done that different ways. Week 1, we focused on cultivating loving kindness towards ourselves and others and our enemies. And then we looked at how we do forgiveness for ourselves and for others. How we love our fear and work with a fear that often paralyzes us. How we listen to God and listen to inner wisdom how God is nourishing us and supporting us and giving us that which we need. And how we stay in a place of gratitude. And we live in the life of gratitude. And yet, even though we practice these things and work with these practices, even just like that, we can become angry and upset, and so we must continue to work again and again. And so we see our Lord Jesus modeling this very thing. So he begins the meal by washing his disciples' feet, and when they protest, he tells them, no, you must allow this. And then at the end he says, you too must do the same. And so he's practicing this love. He's practicing loving into the moment. And he's doing it because he's going to need all the love he can do in the next 2 days with what is going to happen. He is going to need it all to be on board. He's going to need to be together with God and allowing God's love to fully enliven him so that he's able to do as he is commanded, to love us, even to giving his life on a cross. And so we too have been trying to practice some of these things throughout Lent. So, washing our hands. We're told again and again to wash our hands. We've been told that since we were little kids, but we've been told again and again to wash our hands. And so every time we wash our hands now, it can be seen and should be known as an act of love. A love for yourself and a love for your neighbor. And that you are keeping you and your neighbor safe, right? And all the things that we do, that we can do as acts of hospitality, you know, by not going to the store too often right now, is an act of hospitality by not exposing yourself to others and you to them, right? And so by opening it all up. You might say that this ritual of washing our hands that we're doing is really a ritual. And every time you do it, think to yourself, love one another, right? And so how are we using our hands as instruments of love for us to cultivate, preparing for the new beginning, preparing for what's next? You see, because it's often understood, and we will hear this on the Easter Vigil, that the Exodus, the Israelites being able to flee from slavery through the Red Sea, it's like being birthed into a new way, a new being, a new place. And we, through our baptism, are birthed again and again into a new place. And may this Maundy Thursday and this time of shelter in place be a time for us where the love of Christ is our greatest tool and gift. So may we be able to use that greatest gift and love to move us and sustain us and support us through this time. I hear a car alarm outside my house. It's not mine. Maybe it's this time that I should wrap up. And so maybe I'll do just that. So may we, friends, continue to pray that God set us free, set God's love free in us during this time so that we may be prepared to love now and into the new normal. So hear now the words of the Gospel of John, the 13th chapter. It was before the feast of Passover, and Jesus realized that the hour had come from him to pass from this world to Abba God. He had always loved his own in this world, but now he showed how perfect this love was. The devil had already convinced Judas Iscariot, begot of Simon, to betray Jesus. So during supper, Jesus, knowing that God had put all things into his own hands, and that he had come from God and was returning to God, rose from the table, took off his clothes, and wrapped a towel around his waist. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to dry them with the towel that was around his waist. When Jesus came to Simon Peter, Peter said, "Rabbi, you are not going to wash my feet, are you?" Jesus answered, "You do not realize what I am doing right now, but later you will understand." Peter replied, "You will never wash my feet." Jesus answered, "If I do not wash you, you have no part with me." Simon Peter said to Jesus, "Then, Rabbi, not only my feet, but my hands and my head as well." Jesus said, "Any who have taken a bath are clean all over and only need to wash their feet. And you are clean, though not every one of you." For Jesus knew who was to betray him. That is why he said, "Not all of you are clean." After washing their feet, Jesus put his clothes back on and returned to the table. He said to them, "Do you understand what I have done for you? You call me teacher and sovereign, and rightly, for so I am. If I then, your teacher and sovereign, have washed your feet, you should wash each other's feet. I have given you an example that you should do as I have done to you." Once Judas had left, Jesus said, "Now is the chosen one glorified, and God is glorified as well. If God has been glorified, God will in turn glorify the chosen one, and will do so very soon. My little children, I will be with you not much longer. I give you a new commandment. Love one another. And you are to love each other the way I have loved you. This is how all will know that you are my disciples, that you truly love one another." Let us go and pray that we may love one another as God has loved us.